Remember Jimmy McElwain on the yard used to say, you want to be making moves on the street, have no attachments, allow nothing to be in your life that you cannot walk out on in 30 seconds flat if you spot the heat around the corner. Remember that?
Heat is at the pinnacle of heist films, easily one of the best crime thrillers ever made. It's a film so brilliant, in fact, that they toyed with the idea of adapting it into a video game. And it nearly happened, but unfortunately it didn't, and likely it never will. This is the story of how Michael Mann's Heat nearly became a video game. Michael Mann is one of my favourite directors, with such classics under his belt such as Manhunter, Thief and Collateral, Thief being my personal favourite. It's no wonder that he's so well regarded by his peers and viewers alike. His films capture the gritty side of the world, typically depicting characters who are so good at what they do it hurts them, all whilst keeping them distinctly human, and technically accurate, down to the point where Thief had to get its theatrical release cut down as real thieves were using it as a tutorial. If you were to boil Michael Mann's films down to one word, it would be stylish. They look incredible. No one else can capture LA like he can. Those deep blues and nightlife panning shots, there's something special. During the 80s, Mann transitioned to television, producing Miami Vice and closing the decade with 1989's LA Takedown, a TV film about a cat and mouse chase between a cop and a prolific heister. This film wasn't exactly meant to be one, however. It was intended to be a pilot for a new series, but it wasn't picked up, so instead it was chopped up into a film. It was pretty good, but it could have been much more, so he started work on a remake, using LA Takedown as the framework for it. This project would eventually turn into Heat, but would remaking a TV film for the big screen pay off, especially with its staggering $60 million budget. Heat released in 1995, featuring Al Pacino as Lieutenant Vincent Hanna and Robert De Niro as Neil McCauley, to commercial and critical success. Heat was wildly influential, to say the least. It inspired a whole new generation of filmmakers to pursue the ultimate score, and led to films such as Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight. It also led to game designers wanting to take a slice of the pie and create games in a similar vein. If they could match a fraction of the raw energy that went into the street shootout scene, then success would be all but guaranteed. The rights owners, Regency, also liked the idea of it being adapted into a game. After all, this was during the time when movie adaptations were the big thing. Other larger-than-life crime films were being adapted, such as Scarface, The Godfather, and somehow Taxi Driver, much to Paul Schrader's and Martin Scorsese's anger. So Regency contacted Titan Productions to produce it, but the real question is, who would develop it? Someone has to want to do it, but who?
Who? Are you a fucking owl?
It's 2006. Gearbox Software are a small company that specialises in porting games such as Pro Skater and Halo. They just recently branched off and created their own IP, Brothers in Arms, a World War II FPS series that saw moderate success. Due to this, they caught the eye of Titan Productions, who gave them an offer that was simply too good to pass up on. They accepted the request. Heat was to be assigned to Gearbox. It was also during this time that they struck a deal to get the rights to create a game in the Alien franchise, based off 1986's Aliens, going from a small IP such as Brothers in Arms to two major movie adaptations. The scope of them couldn't be more stark. These were behemoths of projects. The risks are high, but just like any heist, the bigger stakes, the bigger payoff, a risk they're seemingly willing to take.
We want to hurt no one. We're here for the bank's money, not your money. Your money is insured by the federal government. You're not going to lose a dime. Think of your families. Don't risk your life. Don't try and be a hero.
Gearbox attended 2006's E3 with the knowledge that they were making Heat, but with the wiseness to not announce it before even starting production, since that leads to overinflated expectations of something that might not even happen. It were going relatively peaceful as far as conventions go, so not really. However, things will get much more hectic as rumours started echoing from peer to peer that Gearbox were lined up to make Heat. They were swarmed by the press, asking questions about a game that I have to reiterate hasn't even reached the production stage yet. It's purely conceptual. They can't exactly avoid all this attention though, it's free publicity out of nowhere. If there's any time to advertise it, it's now. So they did. Randy Pitchford confirmed that they're working on bringing Heat to the digital world. It now being public comes with its own new set of issues. The pressure's on them to deliver a product far exceeding everyone's expectations. As to whether or not they'll buckle under that pressure, only time will tell.
Leave the bank book and the car keys in the kitchen on your way out.
As mentioned prior, Heat wasn't the only game they had planned. They in fact had 3 projects going concurrently, each at different stages. The Aliens game was coming along steadily, moving at a pace to be released nearer to 2013. The other game that they had in the pipeline was an original IP called Borderlands, a quirky looter shooter with a cel-shaded art style. As this was entirely original and all the rights were owned by him, they wanted to prioritize this one. 3 projects all going at the same time is a recipe for disaster, where resources end up being stretched too thin, leading to all 3 being bad. One of the projects has to be paused. Even though they didn't wanna, Heat was their choice. It makes sense considering nothing had even been made for it yet, but it was still a decision that they made with a heavy heart. Randy Pitchford, the director of Gearbox, said, "We have passionate game makers that would love to do it. We've got filmmakers that think it's a great idea that would love to see it done. We have publishing partners that would love to publish it. But we have no time. That's the limiting factor." To make that choice the correct one, the other 2 need to succeed and be big hitters. Otherwise, they would have left Heat out in the cold for nothing.
What the f***? What is your name?
Borderlands was a smash hit, garnering both millions of fans and dollars. The critical reception was good too. Almost immediately, without an inkling of self-doubt, they ordered a sequel to be developed, alongside their Alien game, which was still trudging along. Worries started to build on whether the Alien game would even release or even be worth playing. Not even 3 years later and Borderlands 2 releases to the masses, an even bigger hit than the first in all aspects, profits surging tenfold. They were on top of the industry, Gearbox could not lose. Everything they touched seemed to turn to gold. That was until things changed.
I mean, don't get me wrong, it's cute that y'all think you're the heroes of this little adventure, but you're not.
Well, how do you know I don't actually really like Colonial Marines? I don't, it's fucking atrocious, but you'd have looked pretty silly if I had, wouldn't you?
The Alien project, titled Colonial Marines, released in 2013 and turned out to be a complete disaster, full of bugs, programming bugs, not xenomorphs. And it just not being very interesting at all at its core killed all hope that people had in Gearbox. With one project exceeding all expectations, and the other failing miserably, what is the correct next step to take? Is it to continue the Borderlands series and hope that they continue to be successful? Or is it to revisit the passion project in Heat? After having a terrible experience with the previously licensed project, it makes logical sense to stick with what works, and sadly that's what they did. Borderlands 3 will be put into production, Heat finally laid to rest to fade into obscurity. They knew it was too risky to pursue, and that it's not what the fans want, no matter how much they wanted to do it, so they ultimately dropped it. Since then, other games did fill the gap that is good heisting games, such as Payday 2, which takes tons of inspiration from Heat, such as the Mass and the Armored Transport heist, as well as the aptly named Heat Street, after the film's most iconic sequence. Gearbox stuck to their code. Discipline is what kept them afloat. Knowing that this game will never happen poses a strange question. If Gearbox were to even make Heat, would it have even been any good? That's a question we obviously don't have an answer to, since no one knows what it was meant to be, apart from this quote from Randy Pitchford. This approach to a heist game isn't going to be passively work out the secret plan. This is going to be an in-your-face action game, which is the way we want it to approach it. Heat isn't pure action, it's far more than that. It's a story about the pursuit of the biggest score at the expense of everyone around you, no matter what side of the law you're on. Always putting their life on the line for their own sake and fulfillment, rather than their loved ones. 2 enemies that require each other to exist and provide purpose. It's a violent cycle of corruption that will repeat itself until death. I'm not sure if Gearbox would have went this route in regards to the themes, if pure action and adrenaline was the main goal. Would it have been open world, or a linear story? With Heat, I don't think open world would be applicable, since it's a cat and mouse game between 2 parties. They're not exactly running round.
I mean, is this guy something or is he something? This crew is good.
The game should be single player and have a linear narrative, tackling and going further in depth with the themes established in the film. But none of it matters, since it won't ever get made. And I don't think that's a bad thing. Sometimes things are just better left alone, since you saw how movie adaptations went in the early 2000s. Michael Mann's Heat is brilliant. You didn't need a game adaptation to tell you that.
Pass the cream.
I do wonder what it would have been like though. I mean, one can dream. I do respect Gearbox for walking away from it when they realised that they couldn't do it like they would have hoped. instead letting the license expire so that others can take a stab at it. Knowing when to step away from something takes some discipline, and they demonstrated it. Their actions mirror Macaulay's advice from the film, and it seems that they took it to heart.
Guy told me one time, don't let yourself get attached to anything you are not willing to walk out on in 30 seconds flat if you feel the heat around a corner. Now, if you're on me and you gotta move when I move, how do you expect to keep a marriage?
Well, that's an interesting point. What are you, a monk?